I just want to say that in opening the session that a mind in duality, a mind in polarity, a mind that cannot reconcile the opposite will suffer. And I have a poem, a song, I'd rather express it in words, called Whispers. It kind of describes my experience of going through that fragmented state, through what science called a psychotic break, which I don't think I really had, even though I did have disconnection from reality for a certain amount of time. But I really think it was me trying to integrate all the spiritual light that I had received, which you'll hear about in just a moment. Whispers. Halo sonate. Hemisphere hell. Boxing brain. Blasting the bridge between the two sides of the mind. A loud hush heard humming in my ears. Demons and angels wrestling for my better half. Screaming quiet deaf outbursts of invading intent. Chemical accident. Myelination murdered. Mission aborted. Tissue tainted. Sharp scissors stab my soul from the inside out. Emotion and energy taken over by the enemy. A loud hush heard humming in my ear. Demons and angels wrestling for my better half. Screaming quiet deaf outbursts of invading intent. Chemical accident. Hello, Father Mother. I am the devil's dog. My brain burns in a blast of omniscient oxygen. Why do I know I am doomed? Deliver me from evil aspirations, make straight my path. I'm tired of being a puppet, damned with the sickness. A loud hush heard humming in my ear. Demons and angels wrestling for my better half. Screaming quiet deaf outbursts of invading intent. Chemical accident. Okay. Now this presentation from here forward is really began as a book, and I realized that it needed to be shared with people in person and via audio, an audio conference, audio program. And so I began by saying, man's best friend or foe. Speaking again about dogs. As I was saying before, one of the most annoying things that I used to react to with great anger was repetitive, loud, aggressive barking dogs. Now, a dog who will not stop barking when it sees some animal or an unfamiliar person walking down the sidewalk in front of my house, I could say, for most of my life was a nuisance. And I grew loathsome at my own dogs who I love and who I've loved when they turn into monsters and show their teeth. Now, I would react with disdain at dogs who, though, quote-unquote, gated in by electric fences, would come charging at me, growling, barking, and foaming at the mouth when I walked my dogs down the sidewalk. For a while, it seemed like barking dogs became the bane of my existence. And when I battled with reactivity, that was at times, at the time I battled with reactivity, it was at times explosive. The dogs couldn't help it. They can't help it. But I chose to react just like they did. I became animal consciousness. Now, my big black lab was barking as I wrote out this introduction, and I wrote, go figure. So now what I do is I just block it out, and I dismiss it, saying, well, they can't help it, and they feel threatened, or they're just acting on instinct. Now, though most of us would find incessant dog barking a nuisance, I'm speaking figuratively, obviously, as was introduced in the introduction, in the wider context of this program to encompass all forms of psychological noise and the sensory overload which we experience. That chatter, the compulsive chatter, compulsive thought, known as monkey mind. And that psychological noise that disturbs the constant flow of silence in the present now. Learning to be still and silent is both a science and an art form. And as I touched upon, there are many meditation techniques and muscle relaxation exercises. It seems like every self-help guru has a taper CD out on meditation, or they are actual guided meditations you buy. Now, this book is about a much bigger problem than physical barking dogs. The reason for so much suffering is because we cannot hear. Not through our ears, but through our inner selves, or our divine faculties of discrimination and discernment. We might listen to people in conversation, birds and animals, nature, sound bites from the media. But do we really hear the sounds? Do we really discern their meaning or purpose? I'm not talking about being physically deaf, not even psychologically deaf. Rather, there is just plain too much static noise in our brains. We need to face it. We all hear voices, and our thoughts are loud and repetitive. If we would really admit it, these facts make us restless and tense. And a body and mind that is restless and tense can't clearly hear their higher inner voice. Not to mention the voice of our great absolute divine creator. But don't worry. Despite sharing facts about an extreme case of what I call the barking god dog syndrome, I plan to offer some simple solutions, advice and insight that have brought me great peace and solace. And another thing, as I mentioned before, we will be examining the blind sense mind that is responsible for a great deal of that chatter that distracts us. We need to tame that lower reactive dog nature by saying no to our overbearing sense temptations that usually start as an impulse in the brain. The exciting thing is that we can rewire ourselves to think, hear, and act clearly and with our higher God mind. And what is the key? How can we control our reactive attachments? These questions are the focus of this program. So for now, I'm going to say that the main goal is to attain bliss through self-control, devotion, or bhakti, discrimination and discernment. And through detachment from the very sense pleasures that will never be enough to make us fully content. So we not only have to silence the 1,000 barking dogs, and we can't just try to tune them out, but we have to tame them and transcend the reactive impulses to be of service in the higher fivefold brain system, which we'll be learning about soon. By the end of the program, you will have gained some valuable insights in how to radically change the wiring of your brain and how to transcend levels of consciousness through a form of alchemy and transmutation of darker, chaotic, fearful energies into pure, radiant light. Now switching gears. My real name is Bryan Michael Rice. Though I don't like to admit it. For some reason, it sounds boring to me. And no offense, Mom and Dad, but, thank you for naming me and bringing me into this world. Now, you might be saying, that's awfully selfish, you, Bryan, or accept that your name is who you are. My response to that is a name is a symbol, and a name comes to connote many things. And I'll say that Bryan Michael Rice is a construct, an idea written on a piece of paper that says when and where I was born. It has a number attached to it, and it will until the day I die, and after I die, too, on a memorial stone of some sort. There'll be a dash between two numbers under my name representing the comparatively minute time spent on Earth in this body. This body. Now, names for people usually connote the personality or the character of the person labeled with that name. The name used often enough convinces the people who utter it that is who you really are. Not quite. Under no circumstances is that absolutely true. So why do we need a name? What if I said I think it is to keep us in the world who has encounters with us, with that person in name, sane, on an even keel, to create a pattern, or for convenience? It sounds cold, doesn't it? But a name is a symbol, a signpost. It points to something greater, but is not that greater entity or identity. We get too attached to our names and falsely associate them with who we are. We are not letters and words. We are essence, pure consciousness, ever beginning but never ending. Stated more accurately, we are bornless being. Okay, I'll acknowledge the big elephant in the middle of the room. Why do I have different names? Do I have multiple personality disorder? Or which is called today dissociative identity disorder? No, I don't meet such diagnostic criteria. I'm fully aware of the spiritual self-definitions I use, and then you might ask, Do I have alter egos that I invent out of insanity? No, to that too. My names were bestowed on me by those who initiated me into the mysteries from which I live my life and continue to evolve from. But what about the subtitle? You might be wondering, do I as an individual suffer from insanity or delusion? Or does anybody or everybody suffer from collective insanity? The answer is no. The real me is not, and the real you is not. We are not mad or insane. It is our ego and the egoic thought stream, the egoic mental stream, that of the collective ego. My false bioenergetic electrical chemical brain and bodily printouts for the past 5 years have suffered symptoms that match criteria in a book known as the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Psychopathological Disorders, Edition 4. Now, what do I mean by the false me? Or the not real me? Or printouts? What am I saying? Now, if you can wrap your mind around it, our bioenergetic systems are a ceaselessly flowing river of light that on different occasions become frozen in the space-time continuum. What I mean is that we are ever flowing, ever becoming, and ever evolving, ever changing, and ever beginning. As for the printouts reference, we all have countless numbers of printouts that appear as physical bodies, cells, bones, blood organs, neurons, muscle fibers, skin, tissue, tendons, thoughts, etc. Though we are in a constant state of flux, we print out different versions of ourselves. No version is ever the same, and every last particle of who we think we are is never manifested in a manner similar to those found in our previous versions of ourselves. The self that I'm speaking of here is not the true self, the soul and spirit self, the eternal self, but the ever-changing mind-body self, the egoic self. So the 2005 Bryan is not the 2011 Bryan, and vice versa. And I attribute such insights to a medical and spiritual teacher who inspired me to come to know my true self, beyond thoughts and form, or energy and information. That person being Dr. Deepak Chopra. And he inspired me to see that in a holographic sense, I am a wave in the ocean of consciousness. I contain a part of the whole ocean in my single wave. Now, we are all part of a greater whole. Who I am really is beyond all sickness. We are all beyond all sickness, beyond all suffering, beyond all misery, and beyond false programs for happiness. So, what I'm declaring is that I am and never will be at the level of pure consciousness be sick. Neither will you. The perception or belief that I am sick is just an optical delusion of consciousness. Rather, it is an illusion and can never be true. Why? Because we are begotten, not made. We are immortal, eternal, endless. The finite bodily creatures we assume or materialize into from planes of existence called the causal or ideational, and astral or energetic planes, are temporary forms. The temporary forms that exist in the manifest world, or the world of matter, the appearance of matter, the cloak of matter, the veil of matter, the sheath of matter, they arise out of the causal plane and the astral plane, which I mentioned in the previous part of this program. So finite bodily creatures, why do we have them? Why do we need them if they're not who we are, if they're not real? They are communication devices. Both the Course in Miracles and A Way of Mastery teach that. They're symbols, and just like our names, they're not a constant. They only exist and are meaningful for a fixed amount of time, and then they're laid aside. How does an insane ego come to know themselves as part of the ocean of cosmic consciousness, as one and the same with it, in unitive consciousness, while still occupying a body in the space-time continuum? The answer is in the question. By living in union, or oneness with God, or our first cause and source, with all of life, the world, brotherhood, and sisterhood, there is only one interpretation for the existence of sickness, only one word to describe it, that's separation. The I that is sick is not the begotten nature, which is forever whole. It is the fragmented, broken self-image that has cut itself off from the great life power that is God, and severed itself or withdrawn from life in the form of other living creatures. Now, no man is an island. I think we've all heard that before. And as I said in a poem long ago, solitude is hell. We're social creatures. And continuing in the line of thinking that I've been speaking, influenced by a non-dual, non-polarized, non-divisive text known as A Course in Miracles, we're all part of one mind. Some call it the God mind, some call it the Christ mind. Dr. David Hawkins calls it the divinity of all that is, and the allness. The allness that we belong to is an inherited nature, a divine nature, direct descendants from God. As a result, we are godlike beings. And we, in the truest sense of that nature, create our own realities, even our own universes. Nothing material exists without our faculties of observation, which makes what we see, feel, touch, taste, and seem real, and smell seem real. That's what quantum physics and biocentrism teaches. Now, we live in an aeon or an age of the new science, of spiritual science, a science for the new self-understanding, for new self-understanding, and self-knowledge, where what we believe might appear to be true, but on the flip side, it really is a massive hallucination of untruth. Our thoughts create the world we see, and what we decree, according to the way of mastery, is. So, at some level, my device of separation, the imperial ego, convinced my mind and body to manifest the illusion of a schizoaffective victim. The message of this book, I hope, will echo through the farthest expanses of created universes. That victim consciousness is a dance of delusion called Maya, a state of exile that is experienced at various levels of gradation by everyone at one time or another. What I'm declaring is not just a mere case of saying mind over matter. In the second part of this book, I will reveal a path to God and self-realization that has been around for 1,000 years. Not 1,000, thousands of years. An enlightened path that will show you that the prime cause of everything is consciousness. And that's the art of yoga. And I don't mean the physical, just the physical postures, known as asanas. So the decree really is that everything exists not just because of mind, but because of consciousness. Matter, in its countless forms, materializes from thought. And whether you were schizophrenic even to the slightest degree or not at all, you understand that thoughts can create heaven and hell, and that these states become very real, but only in relativity. If, by the end of this program, I haven't offered a legitimate solution to the main problems or challenges explained in the pages herein, then I will have failed. Though I'll be speaking of fragmented personalities, schizoid personalities, and subpersonalities, I'm hoping to tune in to the current perils that humanity faces. Tune into your higher minds, your God minds, and your inner voice. So I'm going to take ownership for contributing to the pollution in the mental bacteria that gets projected outwards into this world, into this universe, this vast universe. I am tired of miscreating and of having my neurons misfire and hurl out garbage and waste into the motion picture that is our universe. I was lucky to have had 2 novels published and a third parapsychological study as well. Though there was mixed acceptance and some success with the novels, I consider them to be doused with poison because they came from what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body. A lot of films, music, art is projected from the pain body. That pain that is repressed, stored, that seems to become dormant in our bodies, and that comes out and lashes out, sometimes violently or in severe reactions, reactivity especially, and manifests as what seems to be a demon in you. Let's just say that in those books I projected 2 carefully constructed destructive realities, even though I had redemptive themes in it. I said in a newspaper article about my books that, or I was quoted in a newspaper as having said that my dark novels are lit by hope. But what I've learned in my studies in yoga, in Raja Yoga, the science of God realization, the royal science, is that we should be very, very attuned to what we send out into the universe and what we write. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Because again, words have vibrations. They can either uplift people or pull them down. They can be positive, bringing people to a positive polarity or a positive pole, or to a negative one, into a negative state, and all accompanying suffering. So in this program, it's my hope to make things right with what I've sent out into the world. Now, under no circumstances will I ever justify, promote, or fantasize in a violent, fragmented, suicidal, or homicidal manner. Too many people are getting away with polluting the ethers in people's minds with senseless violence and graphic denigration of what it means to be human. And we see it on TV, not to point the finger at the media, because it starts with the person. And then, well, somebody else might point the finger and say, no, it started with their family. Every person is to come to the realization and take responsibility for their mental well-being, for the images they take into their body, just like the foods that we eat. Being aware of what is good for us, what is not, what is poison, what could make us sick, versus what could nourish us. We have to do the same with what we hear, what we see, what we watch, and even what we touch. So I'm here to set the record straight. In my opinion, in those I've researched, schizophrenia, schizoid, programming, they're spiritual in nature. I'm not trying to minimize the people that experience schizophrenia. And yes, physical manifestations, physical symptoms do show and help to diagnose and treat patients with such disorders. But I do want to say that we are all capable of transcending labels that science gives us. That is what this program is. It's a testimony to the transcendence that can occur to those given labels by the world of science. And I hope I'll be able to show that the individuation process into my true self and the integration of a whole and divine personality structure within my being. Now, I'm not a dangerous person. I consider myself love personified, and a faithful disciple to two amazing avatars who have attained enlightenment. Yeshua the Christos, or Yeshua Messiah, who was anointed with the Christos, and a modern-day saint, Paramahansa Yogananda. The transcendent Father and immanent Mother, the holy androgynous absolute all there is power and presence of an unending bliss, blissful love, is the final authority in my life. To these supernal parents, I bow. To no one else. Why did I listen to the inner voice within and decide to write this material? Because I'm tired of being part of the problem, whether I've been sick or not. I want to be part of the solution, to help end suffering, misery, separation, mass hypnosis, and crippling fear. If I could be resurrected from the abyss or the tomb of unknowing, the tomb of unawareness, of fragmentation, separation, and diluted egoic hallucination, so can you. You can, by realigning yourself with the one true constant in all of manifest reality, that is the Godhead. Before the onset of the spiritual emergency, the identity crisis, that hell, I had been on a spiritual journey long before that. My spiritual journey began right around the age of 15, and was intensified up to and including a major illumination experience of mass proportions that ignited a spontaneous Kundalini awakening to which I was unready to integrate, control, nor balance. And as we'll learn in this program, Kundalini is not something to be afraid of. It's something to be respected because it's a dormant potential and power that helps us ascend Godward back towards God realization or realization of the divinity within ourselves. So, if you've been prejudiced against Kundalini, whether through lack of information or through the teachings of a church or institution or a dogmatic statement or series of dogmatic statements, I'm here to tell you that This power, this energy, fiery, intelligent energy, is something that we need to embody to allow the process to happen with guidance, perhaps by a spiritual mentor or somebody who is educated in the process of Kundalini awakening. When I finally had some guidance, this process was accelerated, and the ascension process is something to be welcomed and embraced by all, to become all that we are, to realize and remember all that we are, which is divine. You're going to hear me caution people who aren't totally respectful to or knowledgeable about Kundalini serpent power. Kundalini is often referred to as being like a serpent because of the motion in which it travels up through and around the spine, in and through the chakras, the 7 chakras. And it's the motion that is circular, twisting and winding, that makes it serpent-like. But that energy, the life force energy, lies dormant in the root chakra down near the base of the spine, in the coccygeal area, until awakened. And it can be awakened down from God-directed energy, like the Holy Spirit, fusing and influxing down through from the brain to the root chakra, and then causing Kundalini to rise and ascend. So we'll learn more about that. What I want to say is that I'm on the other side of the Red Sea, so to speak, looking back. Now, I don't believe that the parting of the Red Sea was meant to preserve a chosen people and violently kill the Egyptians who were vilified in the Old Testament. I believe the story has symbolic value. The rushing power of vital life force, or chi, can overpower you if you don't have a system of honoring it and creating resonance with it. What I'm referring to is yoga or other forms of meditation. When I say yoga, I don't refer to hatha yoga, which I mentioned earlier is traditionally known as yoga postures. 9 years ago, actually going on 10 years ago, the most amazing glimpse of the highest heights of divine bliss were afforded me. Now, though I was part of a particular religion at the time of my brush with infinity, the invitation I received was meant to get me where I am now. Free from religious boundaries, dogma, scripture, literalism, condemnation, exclusivity, vain righteousness, male dominance, or patriarchal sexism, by white men of European descent primarily, and blind rules that limited spiritual growth rather than encouraged it. I'll talk more about that in the prologue. This is not a debate over whether science or spirituality should have the upper hand in all things regarding human suffering. In actuality, I'm thankful that spiritual science, the compound of these two disciplines, do go together. So this inquiry is neither a strict adherence to statistics, genetics, and medical forecasting, nor a one-sided form of demonizing all reality, nor an effort to proselytize. And though I have told my woes to somebody, and I have faith in the pharmacological therapy, I don't think it in and of itself is a complete solution to the gravity of mental suffering and anguish. As for the talk therapy component that is typically used as a complement in treatment, though I find it useful to have a sounding board, an objective set of ears, the prescription drugs and talking out of my thoughts, historically and experientially, have not satisfied my deepest yearning. The missing component is the integration of love of the highest degree, pure God consciousness, pure being of the Father-Mother. Now, people, they like the word success. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful and goal-oriented, but like one of the most loving spiritual avatars to ever walk the planet believed, Paramahansa Yogananda, our thoughts, intentions, emotions are vibrations that not only turn into manifestation, but have a boomerang effect. Point blank, I'm determined to inspire further awakening from the mass hypnosis, Maya, delusion, and illusory perceptions that hover in the ethers and atmosphere. We're suffocating, all of us. We're aspirating on our own negativity, and I refuse to contribute to it 1 minute longer. Will you join me in this quest? This program is about what's possible. It's about letting go of worn-out thinking patterns that no longer serve us or the planet. It's about admitting that we have placed too much attention on death and scarcity consciousness, and that spiritual rehabilitation is necessary. We need to think long-term, in an evolutionary perspective. We can evolve Godwards towards superconsciousness or become victims of the animal brains, the fivefold brain system within. Bestial instinctive subconsciousness and its emotional poisons are like quicksand. By the grace of God, I was pulled out of it. And I'm here to help you by pulling you out of the swamp, that false self sewer. Second only to God's continuous emanation of light and awesome cosmic life force, we are the first cause of our reality, which really isn't real at all, though it has taken shape in very dense forms. I'm not about to encourage superstition. Please, I want you to know that. Our vibratory thoughts materialize to create or destroy life. Eckhart Tolle says the human condition is lost in thought, in conceptual prisons, in its desire to consume out of a mindset of not enough, which justifies our actions to rape and pillage the earth to satisfy all the different kinds of psychological and physical hungers we experience. We constantly seek truth in the endless train of thinking that uses us, if we'd admit it humbly so, as puppets. We don't have thought. Thought has us. We're all schizophrenic in a certain sense when our thoughts cannot be compelled to stop, when silence is a barren concept to the health of our psyche and soul. Thoughts rather than true being and resonating with pure consciousness become the foundation of our self-concepts and self-identities. And many who know this condition are driven to crisis or susceptibility to self-destruction. It has to be said, never in any circumstances is there anyone to point the finger at. Not even ourselves, rather our true selves. But we do need to take ownership of the one ugly thing that gets us in all our messes in the first place. The ego. That's right. And we need to admit it. Now come on, be honest. The Ego Alliance presents a pretty convincing case about the nature of reality. That our thoughts define us, and that God is out there somewhere far away, an untouchable, impersonal judge, some policeman, a law-lusting, bloodthirsty, vampiric energy that has a terrible temper, a rageaholic personality who takes pleasure in punishing us. This whole line of thinking is a lie. I'm giving you permission to believe that. It was one of the greatest revelations and greatest truths ever given to me. It helped set me free. Now, where did this kind of thinking come from? The Bible? Handed down mythologies? Who told you these things? That what you think is who you are, and that God is far away and to be feared. It was your ego. The true enemy within. And your ego loves to think. It loves noise. It loves conflict. It loves to divide. Divide you against yourself, you against humanity, you against states, nations, and especially against God. God is a bastard, it dares to say. So the purpose of this program, part of it is I want you to see how thoughts can evolve and how thoughts can be transformed through active imagination, through poetry, song, art, expression, etc. Now, active imagination is a form of dialogue that one engages in with their shadow, or all the repressed attributes in their self that are undesirable. And this, too, like trying to awaken Kundalini, should be done with some caution, because believe me, I know, this also can be like standing in quicksand. If you don't know how to pull yourself out of the unconscious or subconscious, if you prefer to say that, you can remain stuck there, creating many crippling psychological and emotional complexes for yourself. I want you to recognize the evolution and acceleration of thought from dark to light, yin to yang, to eventual stillness and silence is your home base to return to where things get noisy. Now, by now you should have it figured out that the 1,000 barking dogs are not outside of us. They are inside. It is psychological static noise that we will be targeting in reflections between the cracks of poetic song expressions that show you how I ascended, descended, and was resurrected and then transcended. This is a universal pattern, and Catholics call it the Paschal Mystery. I call it a life mystery, a necessary path, only you don't have to walk it alone.